She followed her legendary father's footsteps into the world of advertising and now heads one of Sri Lanka's biggest ad agencies. She's also known for her philanthropy, creativity, and is an unshakable presence in the country's media and communications circles. ETV Power Women proudly presents Neela Marikkar. Hi, and welcome to ETV Power Women. On today's show, we have with us a lady who really needs no introduction. She's the managing director of one of the biggest advertising agencies in the country. She's known for her philanthropy and for her creative flair as well. I'm very, very happy to have Neela Marikkar on the show with us today. Hi, Neela. Welcome to Power Women.
Hi, Minoli. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I wanted to ask you, actually, about how you started your journey into advertising. I know it wasn't really your first love and your first passion, even though your late father was legendary in advertising circles. Just tell us a little bit about how it happened.
I remember from a very young age, my father's, when he started the agency, he started in a home.
Right.
So my first recollections were, him working over the dining table. Okay. I was very small, but, wherever we went, my dad used to take me because, I don't know, he and I had this very close affinity, and I think he just took me around wherever he went. So I went to printers, I went to plate makers, block makers. I used to go with him to the newspapers. So, advertising was like our daily discussion topic at home as well. Yeah. So I think advertising was always there at the back of my mind. Yeah. But somehow, it wasn't the career that I was thinking about. When I was finishing my school career, I was then looking at law. In fact, I applied to the law faculty in Columbia University, but then some strange things happen. I think these are the things that you don't realize they're life-changing. Yeah. And I got this opportunity to study in India, and I think at that time my sister was going off to the United States to do her degree, finish her degree in architecture. Right. And I was like, wait a minute, I was, I think 16 or 17, and then I thought 17, and I thought, I want to go abroad as well, but these are difficult times. At the time when there was, you couldn't really go overseas and study because there was exchange restrictions and control, and there was ceiling of incomes. I remember my dad was, I think at that time, was only allowed to earn 2,000 rupees a month. Those are tough days. So it was difficult, for my parents to send both of us overseas. So India was a second option. One, I think that my parents thought, okay, maybe we could kind of manage that. Yeah. So the chance to study at the JJ School of Art came up, and I just wanted to feel like I was also going overseas. Right, my sister's going, to America, but hey, I must be going somewhere. So it was just a chance thing that I took on. So I started my career in graphic design and art because I've always been interested in art, and I used to do it as a hobby. Yeah. So it wasn't alien or anything to me. Yeah. So that was like, I think, my first introduction, probably getting into the field without realizing that I was getting in.
And it must have been an incredibly interesting time in India as well, at that time where so much would have been happening and a lot of development in that particular
I think field. That the time that I went, India was still a closed economy. But I had it's a very challenging year for me because, I had a very sheltered life in Colombo, The car would drop me at school, pick me up, take me for lunch, bring me back, one of those things. And I think when my parents, they just put me on a plane and sent me. I don't think they really, when I take my, entered my kids into university, I went with them and I settled them in and did all of that. None of that happened,
You're just like, here you go.
And I think like, wow, my parents must have really trusted me or whatever, or they didn't even think about the implications of, putting a 17-year-old on a plane and just sending them, into some, you know, unknown area.
But I mean, what a learning experience, really. You had to kind of go fend for yourself.
Absolutely, Noli. I think that was the year that changed me.
Right.
It made me, to an extent, what I am today, very independent and sort of, you know, being able to face challenges, because that was one of the most challenging years I had. And so I think that from there, you know, I got the opportunity. I did go to the States finally.
To finish.
Yeah, because my sister, she was there, and, you know, she was there willing to sponsor. And then we also had this opportunity where we had an exchange student from the US who lived with us and went to school with us for a year. So her family said, listen, if you're coming, you know, let us host you and do everything for you and come and live with us. And so that was great, you know. So from there on, you know, I think, you know, I kind of grew into that field, but I still stayed very much in the design and the graphic design area. Knew nothing about management, you know, totally out of my realm there. And subsequently married my husband, who I met briefly here on holiday, and moved to London and lived with, you know, in London for 10 years. And there too, I started, after I got married, I was, you know, working in a fashion magazine as an assistant art director. After a while, I was yearning to get home, you know. Sri Lanka has always been home for me. And also my husband and I, we were thinking, you know, we'd love our children to grow up here.
And have the experiences.
And have, you know, have a Sri Lankan, you know, upbringing. And we wanted them to know their origins, where they came from. So we took the decision to come back. And when I came back, my father said, hey, you got to come work for me. So I joined him as an art director. And, you know, I worked my way up, and took him 7 years of training. He put me through 7 years of training and learning management and stuff like that. I mean, today, I do only management. I don't do any art or design, you know.
Okay, well, that's a wonderful point for us to take a little break.
Sure.
So for all of you at home, don't go anywhere, because we're going to be right back after this short break with lots more from Neela. We'll see you soon. Hi, you're watching Power Women on ETV, your lifestyle channel. Actually, Neela, I wanted to ask you, you must have seen so many changes in the field of advertising from, you know, when you started to what it is today. I mean, how have you, seen it sort of grow and change?
Minoli, it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, when I remember as a child, and I used to go with my father, we used to go and sit there while they used to have this thing called metal setting, you know, where they would set every single word, you know, and then anything that they're doing, copy, text, and it was all done that way. And then you have to wait for them to run it off, you know, and it comes wet off, you know, the sheet with like broken type, and they have to put a powder on it to dry it, and then you take it back to the office, and they would have to manually try and clean it up.
Amazing.
I mean, that was just one, you know. In terms of technology, you know, it's a completely different industry today. I mean, technology with the advent of computers and, you know, all these amazing possibilities that have emerged. I mean, it's really is phenomenal what has happened to the business as a business. At the same time, I think that have you watched the series Mad Men?
Yes, I know, it's all about the cocktail hour, though, isn't it?
Well, I think I had a really good time. Advertising was really fun then, and I think I look at my dad's time, and I think, you know, I think they had a little bit of that fun. You know, it was lots of fun. You know, and I think that there was a lot of spontaneity there. And I think I remember my dad. He would just have this big layout pad, and he'd have a bunch of pens, you know, felt pens, and he'd sit there in front of the CEO of the client,
and just be like,
and the two of them would just you know, draw up an ad right there, and he'd write the copy, and then he'd approve it, you know? And he'd walk off with an ad, you know, and I'm like, I mean, God, it was amazing. And today, I mean, there's no way you could ever do that. It has so many processes, and, you know, you've got to do these briefs, and there's a marketing brief and a client brief and a creative brief, and, you know, and it goes through planning, research, everything has to be validated. So by the time you go through all of that, you know, I mean, there's beautiful work being done, you know, don't get me wrong, but it's just that it's much more labored now. Than it used to be. That spontaneity is, you know, I mean, today everybody wants to see everything validated, you know, and I can understand that because there's a lot of money being spent, and clients need to know that every cent spent is wisely spent, and they're accountable, you know. So in that respect, the business has changed, and also consumers have changed. I mean, you know, today to reach consumers, there's so much choice. I think in the time when my father, you know, was the chairman, I mean, there was one newspaper group, there was like only one radio station, and you know, and then came one TV station. So it was, you know, it's a whole different ballgame. I mean, today, you know, there are 47 radio stations alone, and you know, so many 14, 15 TV stations. I mean, countless newspapers. So it's changed a lot.
Would you have any sort of advice for anyone trying to break into advertising? Any sort of young people out there? What advice would you give them?
Well, I think it's a great industry, and I think people work very hard. They have some fun as well, and and you're also creating things. I mean, this is a business of ideas. So I think if you are somebody who has a creative spark, and you know, you're challenged by what you see around you, and you think you have a good, you know, ability to articulate that, I think you should look at advertising. I certainly think there's a lot of opportunity. It's a growth area, but not the advertising that we knew. One has to recognize that it's a new type, new area. It's very much moving towards, you know, the digital era. So I think you've got to be very very internet savvy, and I think that's the future.
Definitely. And I think what's interesting actually is, and you've sort of always said this, is as a woman, it's not a hard industry to be in, you know, and I think that, I mean, if you look at advertising today, a lot of sort of the top management and heads of companies are women, which I think is wonderful to see.
You're right.
You know,
it's one of those unique industries in Sri Lanka. I don't know that it's universal. I think it's particularly in Sri Lanka. There are a lot of women in advertising, and I mean, okay, I'm head. I mean, we have 6 companies in the group. And quite a lot of those companies are headed by women as well.
Which is amazing to see.
You know, I think that women are passionate. You know, not to say that men aren't, but okay. But women are passionate, and I think we are multitaskers, and we are quite creative. So I think, you know, women is a natural field for women, I think, you know. So yeah, there's a lot of women in this field, and I have always felt comfortable, you know, being in the industry.
Which is really, really encouraging to hear, and I think especially for people out there, well, you know, girls out there who really want to sort of take this up. And you know, during your career, you probably had one of probably the most challenging times for you was, you know, when the airport was bombed and Sri Lankan Airlines lost nearly virtually 60%, 70% of their fleet. I mean, just talk us through that and how, you know, being in charge at that time, how you sort of the impact.
Well, Sri Lankan Airlines is our biggest client, and we had a big, you know, team. We had a lot of international resources, and all of that happened because it was just soon after the launch of Sri Lankan Airlines. And I mean, they're a wonderful client and wonderful brand. And you know, the airport attack that happened was a kind of a strange day for me because my mother had been ill with cancer for about 10 months. And she was very, very sick. So for the last 2-3 months, I was like, you know, at her bedside, and every night, you know, I was like up with her quite many nights. And the last stage was really, really painful. And, you know, she passed away, and the funeral was on the 23rd of July, 2001. And, you know, finally, after everything was over, I went to bed. Really exhausted and very sad. I was very sad
emotionally
that day.
Must have spent,
And then 3 hours later, I get a call, you know, from my office saying, you know, people, you know, all upset saying, you know, the airport had been attacked. And then here was my biggest client, you know, and I was just like, oh my God, you know, two things. And I think that, you know, I never really had time to grieve for my mother in that sense.
You were just thrown
because I got thrown into a whirlwind there, you know, because we had to kind of, you know, work on all the things that were happening at the time and the country and, you know, got so affected, the economy got affected. You know, it was a very, very challenging time for everybody, for business, for the tourism sector, for our clients like Sri Lankan Airlines. And I think that was a time when, you know, some of us in the business community looked at, okay, is there something we can do? And I mean, I being from the communication side, I volunteered my time, you know, to tourist support that time. There were a lot of people who volunteered, you know, to try and do damage control, because there were so many negative, you know, releases going out
Right,
and warnings about, you know, I mean, a lot of the airlines pulled out. They stopped flying. They cut their flights from 7 to 1 flight.
Yeah.
I mean, ships stopped calling. I mean, there was all these sort of things that were going
really
on. And it kind of, you know, galvanized itself. And I think there was, you know, I mean, it's our sort of group of us came together and, you know, formed a business initiative to see, okay, you know, to understand what was going on, to see, okay, you know, is there anything that we can do, you know, to kind of, you know, address some of these things.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to have to take another little break.
Sure.
But again, for everyone watching at home, don't go anywhere, because we're going to be right back with a lot more from Neela after this short break. We'll see you soon. Hi, and welcome back to ETV Power Women. Neela, I'm going to ask you, what were you like as a child? I know we touched on your childhood a little bit, but what were you like as a young girl?
There's just my sister and me.
Yeah.
And I was this skinny, dark, you know, straight-haired, little, wafy little thing. And my sister was this fair, curly-haired, nice, rounded kid. And people used to, you know, always look, and you know, she was much older than me, and people used to go up to her and say, "My sweet," you know, and they look at me and like, no, maybe I'm exaggerating, but I always grew up had this feeling like, oh my God, you know, I was this scrawny little one, you know, and I think that was part of the reason that my dad, you know, I think he kind of thought, I better do something about this little girl, you know, so I think he took me under his wing and kind of, you know, took me everywhere, and I was like inseparable. He was like my life, you know.
Wow.
And so I grew up, you know, I think I had a great childhood, you know. I had a wonderful set of parents who were very broad-minded, liberal, and very open on things, you know. And I mean, I'm really thankful for that, because I think it gave me an excellent grounding.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about how you met your husband. I know you mentioned that you were here on holiday, and so was it, you know, sort of love at first sight? And
well, yeah, you know, I had just come back from the States from uni, and then he had just come on holiday.
Okay.
He was living in London.
Yeah.
And it was funny, this friend tried to set us up.
Okay.
Okay. So I get this random call from this friend, and it says, "Oh, you know, I've got some friends who have come from overseas. We're going out, and would you like to join?" But I was like, actually, no. Who are these friends? No. But then my husband's out, because he's very persistent. I guess he must have wanted to go out with me, right? Because they land up, you know, they come back, and they drive in the evening, and my friend says, "Oh, we just thought we'd pop in and see whether you change your mind." And in walks Zaruk, you know. And so I said, "Oh, hi," you know, shook hands, "Nice to meet you," and all of this. And they said, "So won't you change your mind?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." Anyway, they left.
Yeah.
But my husband's, you know, was quite persistent, and he's made it a point to stay in touch. And at that time, I was seeing someone else, and I think he was seeing someone else as well, but I don't know in London. But he lived in the road next to us.
Yeah.
And so he used to sort of walk past, knock on the door occasionally, and said, "Oh, I was just walking past, and I thought I'd just say hi," and all that. But, you know, so we kind of became friends, you know, and about 8-9 months later, he wrote to me, and he said, "Hey, you know what, I'm coming back to Sri Lanka for New Year's Eve and Christmas, and would you go out with me New Year's Eve?" And I was like, whoa, he's persistent, you know. So I said yes. Okay. And I guess there was no looking back after that. And he actually proposed to me on the telephone.
Oh my goodness,
how
really?
romantic, right? He said, "You know what, I think we should get married. Why don't you discuss it to your parents?"
Like, hello?
You know, you're supposed to woo this, you know, throw the roses and the champagne and all that, but, you know, Saruk's a pretty practical guy. So I ran downstairs and I told my parents, "Guess what? Saruk proposed to me." And I said yes, and he's coming down, and we're getting married next week. And so that's what happened, actually.
Wow.
You know, so of course, you know, we come from 2 different communities, and there was all this, you know, issues with his family because he was marrying a Christian. Yeah. Subsequent to the wedding and all the, you know, heartache and, you know, hurt feelings and all of that. everyone patched up like a year later.
Okay.
Sadly, they didn't come to our wedding.
Okay.
But you know, they have been they've been awesome.
No, it's a lovely story, actually. Tell us a little bit about your two girls, your two daughters. Actually, Leah reminds me so much of you.
Oh yeah.
I see so much of her in you. It's incredible.
Well, they are the pride and joy of my
Yeah.
life. I think if somebody asked me what were my greatest achievements, I think it's my two daughters.
Yeah.
They're awesome. I miss them a lot because they don't live here anymore.
Yeah.
They live in London, so you know we see each other a few times a year. But they're very understanding. You know, I mean, I've always been a working mom.
Yeah.
And I worked long days, and I remember, I mean, with Leah, I did take some time off because
Yeah.
I was living in London, and you know,
it's a
you
lot,
don't have the
yeah.
help that you have here. But when Tash was growing up, actually, she always says, "Mom, you know, how come you didn't spend that much time with me?" But you know, it was a tough challenge because I was building my career.
Yeah.
You know, my father had, you know, put responsibilities on me, and I had to deliver. We had a, you know, big operation, and I still wanted to be this, you know, mom and have these, you know, great kids and a family life. So it was difficult, but I have to say they were very, very understanding. You know, I mean, at no stage did they ever say, you know, I think they've always been supportive and proud of the fact that, you know, I am who I am, and I mean, you know, I'm really, you know, really grateful for that. And whatever time that I could, you know, manage, I always tried to make it quality time. I'd always get them to come pick me up from school, so we always had lunch together. And even though I used to work late, you know, sometimes they would come in and, you know, sit in my office room for a bit.
Yeah.
Weekends were always precious.
Yeah.
You know, I tried not
Family
to do anything
time.
else. Yeah. And in the night, I always somehow got, you know, to put them to bed. And often, reading a book, I'd fall asleep fast before bedtime. And they'd wake me up and say, "Mom, you're sleeping."
Get up, it's story time.
Yeah, it's story time. But some of the best times I've had is with them, you know. So, and I think that it's a challenge for working women, you know.
It's tough,
yeah,
right?
and there's always this guilt side of you about like, my gosh, you know, did I spend enough time with them?
Well, that's another great note for us to take another break. And actually, when we come back, we're going to hear what they have to say about you on our confession cam, which is my favorite part of the show. So we've got that to look forward to after our little break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be back soon. Hi, and welcome back to ETV Power Women. We've got with us on the show today Neela Marikkar, and we're going into my favourite segment of the show, which is the confession cam, where we get a little insight into you as a person and, you know, from your friends and family's perspective. So why don't we take a look at that?
My mother is someone who is very difficult to sort of pin down into one, like, you know, box, as it were. She is an incredible woman. She has completely inspired me and countless others around us pretty much my whole life. She's very resilient. She's very patient, although as her daughter I would say sometimes and sometimes not, but obviously I'm the daughter, so it's different. She's very hardworking and committed. There's a massive difference between Neela Marikkar, the mother, and Neela Marikkar, the businesswoman. The difference is that, you know, people don't get to know my mother the way that we obviously know her, which is the way I think with anyone really who's in a high-profile business position or any position of kind of authority. And I think that for her it's quite difficult because she comes across as being quite, you know, firm and maybe hard-nosed sometimes, but you have to be, because in the industry that she works in, it's very challenging. It's male-dominated, but also she has more to prove as a result.
I was born in 1985 August, and my mom started working in September. She was so driven to get back into work. And one of the things I remember, a little anecdote she told me, was when she was traveling, when she had to travel for business conferences in Hong Kong and stuff like that, and she was breastfeeding me, she'd take me along with my nanny. She'd leave us in the hotel room, and she'd go from her meetings, and then she'd like check her clock, run to the room, breastfeed me, run back to her meeting, finish it off, and come back. And she was consistently doing that for like 6 months just to ensure that she did the full time of breastfeeding, but also juggled her work life. She's amazing like that. I do aspire to be like her, but the bar is up here. I can only hope to get halfway. I'll be very pleased with myself because she's a wonderful woman and she's incredible. So, you know, lucky to even be half the woman she is.
Wow. My goodness.
That's really, really touching.
That is touching.
Yeah. No, which is why it's my favorite part of the show, because everyone gets really nervous about what they're going to say, but it's always beautiful. So the dreaded 10 after this short break, so make sure you stay tuned, because we're coming back with that on ETV, your lifestyle channel. We'll see you after the break. Hi and welcome back to ETV Power Women. We've come to the final part of the show, the bit where I put our lovely guest on the spot and ask her some dreadful questions, which I'm sure she'll, you know, answer beautifully. Right, are you
see
ready?
me running out?
Yeah. No, you'll be fine. They're not as dreaded as one would think.
Okay, I shall tell you after.
Okay, well, I'm going to get right into it. Question number 1. How do you react when someone introduces you as Reggie Kandappa's daughter?
My father was a legend, and you know, I'm proud to be his daughter. So I don't have any issues with it. But I did, you know, initially when I had to establish myself, being his daughter and living up to his image was tough.
What movie do you watch again and again and again? Is there any movie that you have?
I would say I don't have a movie that I watch over and again, but I do love Mad Men. I do watch it all the time.
It's brilliant. It's just pure genius. What's the most shocking thing an employee of yours has ever done?
During work or after, when they leave?
Your choice. Your choice.
I would say during working hours.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had female managers who come, you know, who burst out into tears when they can't cope, and I've always had to say to them, listen, you know what, you want to have a cry, you don't ever do it in public. That's exactly what people expect you to do. You know, go into the bathroom and cry your eyes out and just come out. You know.
What is your biggest regret, if you have one?
I think that maybe if I could have spent more time with my girls, I think I look back and I think I wish I had, you know, they've gone, you know, they've escaped into their new life, and I do miss, I mean, I do think back sometimes, I wish I had more time with them.
Do you keep in touch with your ex-boyfriends?
Actually, no.
What is the one thing that you would say has made you the woman you are today?
I wouldn't say there's one thing. You know, I think there were many contributing things, and I think being my father's daughter, you know, added a lot to my life. I've also had the chance to travel. I've had the chance to speak at some amazing forums. You know, the opportunities that have presented themselves to me have been immense. And I think the chance to expose myself internationally, whether it was to do a leadership program at the Columbia Graduate School, changed my whole attitude towards management and how I ran my business. I mean, I went through a life change there.
If you hadn't chosen advertising and made it your career, what other profession would you have liked to have gone into?
Well, like I said, I was thinking of law. You know, and perhaps if I hadn't gone to art school in India, I would have been a lawyer, and I don't know what my life would have been like.
How would you say you respond to negative criticism?
Depends. Because for my husband, usually I'd argue with him. One thing I've learned is that you really have to listen. You know, sometimes you don't want to hear the things that you want to hear. But if you don't listen, you can't improve yourself. And I think that you know, the criticisms that have been leveled at me have helped me to mold me to be a better person, I think.
Are there times when you turn into a monster?
Oh, yes. You can probably ask my family. I'd ask my husband that.
What would you say is your greatest achievement?
My children.
Yeah.
I think I look back and I think, when I look at my kids, you know, kids, they're women now, I think they're my greatest achievement.
Great. Well, that's it. Those were the dreaded 10.
They were not dreaded.
Yeah, I know. They were really good.
The monster question.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show, but thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure having you, and I think it's been a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
For all of you watching at home, we'll be back again next week with another special guest, so make sure you catch that program. If you'd like to know more about Power Women, log on to our website at www.etv.lk, or you can check out our Facebook page. So until next week, goodbye.